Today, as I was meditating and contemplating on a topic, it dawned on me that I used to do this weekly spiritual call that I was encouraged to do by a mentor of mine. And I remember the first time that I did that call that I scripted it out, decided what I was going to talk about, and did the talk. And I was supposed to speak for about an hour. And so I laid out the topic, scripted it out, and I think I spoke for maybe about 15 to 20 minutes. And I ran out of things to say. I made it through, but in the wake of that call, I sat and wondered, what I had done wrong. What could I have done? Did I not prepare enough? Did I not, spend enough time, doing some type of, preparation of, my topic. And so as I was sitting there trying to figure things out, my mind is racing. And then I brought my mind to silence. I quieted my mind and kind of went into a little bit of I went into a meditative state. And it was when I did that, the answer came to me about how I should prepare for the call. And the answer was that I don't have to worry about that because it's not me who the message is coming from. I just have to set the intention to do it and move out of the way and allow myself to be the vessel. So the next time I prepared for that show, there was no preparation other than me meditating for 5 to 10 minutes beforehand. And then when I went and did the show, I spoke for a full 50 minutes straight before I knew it. And at the end of my talk, I asked the people who were on the call if they had any questions. And they said, no, sorry, we don't have any questions. And I was like, well, I'm sure you have to have some questions. I covered a lot of stuff on the call, and I spoke for a while. I'm sure you have some questions. And they were like, no, we don't have any questions because the questions that we had, you answered them all. And so that was what came to me as I was contemplating what to speak on the show tonight, was to just move out of the way and let myself be a vessel and let the topics come through. That's why this time, as opposed to other shows, instead of just one topic, there are a few topics that came to my consciousness, and we may talk about more things. But then, one of the other ways, that I used to do that spiritual discussion would be also to observe, and this is one of the topics that I wanted to cover, was I would talk about things that I had observed in my life, patterns, recurring discussions that I had been having with people, knowing that my experience is a lesson in and of itself. And so as I reflected upon those things, I would gain insights, knowing that life is a teacher if we are paying attention. And so whatever insights that I gained from my observations and reflections, I would also share on that discussion. To also underscore that point, I had a brother reach out to me for counsel just a couple of days ago. And he was expressing that some of the stress that he was experiencing came over his frustrations over not knowing what to do to promote his business. He felt that he had a really sound business, but he was struggling with really trying to figure things out, how he was going to get his message out, how he's going to promote the business, how is he going to go about getting customers and, building the business to where it can sustain itself. And so his, frustrations ended up evolving into anxiety and even some fear. And so he asked me how to resolve that, how to overcome that. And so I had a couple of observations to share with him. The first one was in alignment with what I just shared, which was to not concern himself with the how he was going to do it, but to set the intention to do so, to be of service, and to then quiet his mind and allow himself to be guided to the answer as to how he will succeed, and to set his thoughts on the vision that he has for himself, for the success of his business, for the impact that he plans to make, and to see that as his reality, but not concern himself with figuring out the how, and trust that the how will come to him, will be revealed to him. In any moments where I have caught myself being in any kind of anxiety about how I was going to do something, that's what I always do, is to stop thinking and quiet my mind. And then the how becomes revealed to me. And so many times it's important for us to just get out of our own way and realize that it's only for us to have the will to set the intention to decide what we're going to do and to take a step forward, believing that it will come to pass and knowing that the how will be revealed to us. And so it's having faith in ourselves and faith in the higher power, whatever term we want to refer to it as, whether we want to refer to it as the higher power as God or the universe, or if we have some personalized identification that we would refer to, a name of God that we're comfortable with, with the understanding that whatever we call or refer to it as, it's the same. The name is irrelevant. But just stepping out with the faith that we will be provided with the direction, and realizing as well that even where it comes from is not really coming from outside of us, that it is that we are one and the same with that source. And so it's learning to not rely on our mind. Often the mind gets in the way. It's an impediment to us, because the mind is not supposed to be in control of us. It is for us to direct it once we know what it is or have been revealed what it is that we need to do. But typically we go through life with the reverse perspective or objective, where we basically are servants of our minds. We are slaves to our minds rather than us being masters of it. And that's why we often find, if we approach life that way, life is often difficult. And may be in, some form of turmoil, because many of us don't have control over our minds. Our minds are in control of us, and if our minds are in control of us, then our minds are controlling our emotional state, because we're not controlling our thoughts. We're not in control of our actions, because we bow to whatever thoughts that we allow to be planted in the garden of our minds, and it takes root. And, as George Clinton says, blossoming sooner or later into an act and bears its own fruit. From the song, Funkadelic song, Good Thoughts, Bad Thoughts, for those Funketeers who might be listening in. So, I want everybody to reflect upon that And that might be something that would be of benefit. No, well, it is something that would be benefit to you as you apply it in your own life. So while we're there, I'll just briefly touch upon the importance of being in observation. Just as I said, if we approach life with awareness and with the ability to be able to observe, then life can be and will be very instructive for us. And life is meant to be just that. Because the purpose of our existence is for us rather, to observe our life experience and to come to some conclusions from our experiences, and then use the information that we gather from that to realize that life, if just only lived for experiencing the physical things that the experience has to offer, and doing so with the expectation that somehow that we will find happiness, that is a false expectation. And so we go through life, we go through a number of different lives and births and rebirths, with the ultimate objective of us finally being able to step back and say, this is not taking me anywhere. I'm not finding happiness through just going through life experience. These things that I had thought would make me happy have not done so. What else is there? Where can I find happiness? Which is what we're all really looking for. And so we embark upon this search to find it. And when we're really intent on doing so, then we will be led on the path to find it. We won't have to figure it out what the path is. We will be led to it based upon our earnest intent to find it, to find the source of true happiness. Realizing that it's not going to be found in objects. It's not going to be found in money. is not going to be found in other people, is not going to be found in where we live, how much we travel. Not that those things aren't enjoyable at times. Some very much so. But it's not in a sustainable happiness. It's transitory. The effect wears out after some time. And so we'll come to that realization and look for something deeper. And that's when the path becomes revealed to us. It's not something that we have to figure out. We just have to be open to it and come to the realization that those things that we thought that were going to bring us happiness will not do so. We can observe lessons that we may gain from our experiences. Each and every experience that we have, there's a purpose behind it. There's something for us to learn and grow from. There are no mistakes. They're just opportunities to learn and grow. I don't regret any experience that I've ever had. I don't look back and have remorse over choices that I've made, though sometimes I wish I had made other choices, but ultimately I've learned from those things and gained some great insight. And if I had not gone through those experiences, I wouldn't be where I am now, because reflection upon some of those things have been very insightful and has helped to illuminate some of the things that I have read in the realm of spirituality. And so having had those experiences makes these spiritual principles that I read about concrete in such a way that it gives me a deeper level of understanding of it, and further so has put me in a position, because of the insight, to be able to explain it to others, because I can relate those experiences to spiritual principles and can share the effects of them, positive or negative. And positive and negative is only a matter of perspective, because it's all positive as long as we use it to grow. So that's why it's important to be in observation, to maintain awareness. And with observation and awareness, we also come to the realization that we're always making choices. At every moment, we're making a choice. We're making a choice about what we're thinking at any given moment, what thoughts we allow to resonate in our consciousness. We're making choices about what we choose to focus on. what we end up choosing to focus on ends up influencing what we choose to do. It influences our choices about our emotions. Yes, we do choose our emotions because we're choosing our thoughts. And our emotions are directly tied to them. And so as we learn to be able to expand our observation and awareness, we can evolve to the place where we begin to make conscious choices rather than making unconscious choices based upon habit. And that's where when we talk about breaking patterns, whether it be patterns that we've developed for ourselves or patterns that we've observed and that have been passed down from our family, we can break those patterns, particularly those that don't aid in our ascension and development and growth. We begin to be able to censor ourselves, to censor thoughts, censor the words that we use, censor our actions. In order to be able to do so, it's important for us to be able to learn the principle of detachment. And detachment does not mean to be insensitive, to be aloof and uncaring. It means to learn to be able to observe oneself from a perspective that we are not our body, we are not our mind, we are not our senses. That we are spirit, that the physical world is transitory, and then to learn to not allow those things to adversely affect our state of being. Because our true state of being is bliss, is happiness, and is not conditionally tied to the circumstances, what goes on around us, what people say or do, other people's thoughts and opinions about us. Is learning to be unaffected by those things, realizing that none of them have anything to do with us. At least in terms of what other people say and do. Those things have nothing to do with us. Our circumstances, however, have much to do with us because the circumstances are a direct reflection of what we focus on. what thoughts we focus on, what emotional state that we allow ourselves to fall into or direct ourselves into. Because we can either be conscious or unconscious about it. And if we're conscious about what choices we're making, what we're doing, then ideally we make decisions that benefit us in terms of our growth and ascension. So we learn to realize that happiness doesn't come from outside of us. The source of happiness lies within. So if you go back and look at the topics, you realize that they're all interrelated. As I'm talking, that should be becoming apparent to you as we talk. Because if we then come to realize that happiness can only be attained from within ourselves, then we realize that our perspective about relationships must change. Because most people have an illusion about relationships that the right relationship will bring us happiness. The right person will bring us happiness. Or that the wrong person will make us miserable. As if another person has the ability to be able to control our emotions, our state of well-being. They don't. Happiness is our own responsibility. It's not for someone else to make us happy. It's not possible for someone else to make us happy. And if we try to burden someone with that, it will only create disappointment for us and frustration for them. Because we've set them up for failure, because our happiness is not their responsibility, and their happiness is not our responsibility. Which is one of the primary reasons why relationships are in such turmoil right now, in particular, and unfortunately, it is exacerbated in the Black community because we collectively, Black men and Black women, are blaming each other for our lack of happiness. We're pointing fingers at each other. For the lack of happiness, the misery and suffering that we experience with each other. not taking any responsibility for the fact that we chose the people that we brought into our lives. We chose them. And we chose them despite our intuition telling us that we shouldn't be with that person. We've knowingly put ourselves in bad situations with people. We've knowingly put ourselves in situations where people are really just acting out what they've shown themselves to be. And we knew it when we made the choice. And anybody who says that that's not true is lying. I'll be straight up. Nobody fooled you. You knew what you were doing. You knew who they were when you made the decision to be with them. You overlooked the red flags. You ignored the warnings coming from your intuition. Instead, you focused on, I've done the same thing. We tried to find some glimmers of hope. We looked at things like their potential, overlooking the things that were glaring in front of us. We've had different motivations for doing so. And we all know what they are. But we've talked ourselves into making bad choices. And when they've behaved in the manner that they have always done, we don't look at ourselves and question our choices. We don't reflect on the decision and notice and remember what our intuition was telling us at that moment. Because no one wants to take responsibility for what we're going through. It's easier to point the finger and blame. And when you point the finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. So you'll never hear me saying someone did this to me or that to me. I put myself in some bad situations. And as I reflect back on those decisions, I knew it. I knew it. So this isn't something I'm just telling you out of a book. The choices I've made brought the suffering that I've experienced with people because I overlooked things that were already there, that were readily apparent. I didn't listen to my intuition. So I created my own suffering through poor choices, motivated by the wrong things. Short-term pleasure for long-term pain. I take responsibility for that. But those experiences, though I didn't appreciate them at the time, taught me good lessons. And some certainly I won't repeat. And help to expand my awareness so that I'll be mindful of not repeating that same mistake. So, pain can be beneficial from that standpoint because it helps us to avoid making the wrong choices. So that's one of the most basic issues that creates conflict in relations is the expectation that the other person will make us happy. So happiness is an individual responsibility. So for a relationship to blossom and work, it requires both people to let go of any expectations that the other person will bring them happiness. Not to say that there aren't things that we can each do to enhance our experience. We all have likes and dislikes, wants, desires, preferences, and things like that. And we should get to know those things and to do them for our relationship partner because we want to. Because we know that brings some level of happiness and fulfillment, whether it be temporary or not. But we want to be able to bring each other some type of joy, and we should do that, but do it selflessly, because we know that that's something that's going to make them or bring them some happiness, some temporary happiness. And again, we all have our likes and preferences, desires, right? And so we appreciate when someone does things like that for us, and that's okay. Again, as long as we don't get caught under the illusion that the true happiness is going to come from them. Okay. And so we need to each be on a path of spiritual growth to where we are seeking for that eternal source of happiness within ourselves and not burdening our relationship partners with the responsibilities for making us happy. The other problem is that often when people do choose to do things for their relationship partner, they're not doing it from a selfless perspective. They're doing it from a selfish perspective, motivated by wanting to get something back in return. That's the motivation. Instead of doing it just because we want to see a smile on their face. So it becomes transactional. And so that creates conflict. Because they may not do exactly what we want or expect them to do. Expectations create our own disappointments. Our expectations that create our disappointments, not what other people do or don't do. So there's a lesson there. So And that takes us into spiritual practice and its benefits. Those who have been tuning in to Journey into Self here with me have known and would know how I continuously extol the benefits of meditation, because it helps us develop the skills of being able to detach, observe. It expands our awareness. It helps us to be able to reflect and to take in the lessons that life is bestowing upon us, and it helps us to compel our growth. But it's something that we have to dedicate ourselves to do on a regular basis in order to be able to gain benefit. And so it's, learning meditation, engaging in some type of yoga practice. And yoga is not just about exercises, but it's about learning essentially control. And by controlling our physiology, controlling our breath, breath is tied to control of thoughts. Breath is tied to controlling of emotions. And so the practice of yoga doesn't involve a lot of breath control. And then through breath is the elixir of life, that controlling the breath and the energy from the breath, air, prana, chi, we can redirect that energy in order to be able to help awaken our consciousness. To open up our third eye that we may truly see. And then finally, I'll talk about ignorance, knowledge, and humility. And this is related to a post that I put on Facebook a couple of days ago, where it says, ignorance is not a negative condition in and of itself. For there are things that we are all ignorant of at any given time. Yet, ignorance may become negative when it's a conscious choice to remain so. Ignorance is often a chosen path for some to facilitate holding on to beliefs that cannot be substantiated by facts. Let us always be in pursuit of truth, of knowledge and truth, for the truth shall set us free. And there's a lot contained within that to reflect upon. And so it is for us to always be in search of truth. We want to be on the pursuit of truth about ourselves, knowledge of self, knowledge of who we are truly as spirit, knowledge of ourself in terms of how we've identified who we are is, understanding the motivations behind our behavior and ultimately coming to the realization that none of those things are us anyway, and that we don't have to be any certain way, or we can be any way we choose. And so removing the layers of things that we have relied upon to define ourselves, because none of those things are us. They're not who we truly are. We don't have to be any certain way. We can be anything we choose. Knowing our history, our family history, our history, the history of our people, understanding the history of humanity, understanding the cycles. So it's always be a continuous search for truth. Knowledge is ever unfolding. There are always further layers to uncover. So it's always important for us to never become complacent, arrogant with the accumulation of knowledge, thinking that we know. Because as much as knowledge of we is accumulated, is just an infinitesimal amount compared to the knowledge that there is for us to gain. As much as we think we know, there's much more for us to know. So relatively, we really don't know anything. And so it's important for us to maintain humility and the openness to continue to allow ourselves to be revealed unto deeper levels of knowledge. Because there's more to whatever it is that we think that we know. But as soon as we draw the conclusion that we know, we close ourselves to the further revelation of knowledge. And so many of us think that we know and have become very arrogant about what we think that we know because we've accumulated a little bit of information. And information is not knowledge. It's just simply information. True knowledge will come from within. And tapping into that eternal source. That's where true knowledge is. Then it becomes part of our experience. It becomes part of our being. But it's good to always be a seeker of knowledge, to assimilate information, to contemplate on it, to engage in discernment through our spirit, to identify that which is truth and that which isn't. And not have any preconceived notions about whether something is true or not because of how that information is packaged, so to speak. Because we may not like the source of it. It's not about that. It's about whether or not the information holds truth. And so often it's important for us to not form judgments based upon the package that the information comes in. Because we may miss something. And certainly not to fall into the arrogance of knowledge, thinking that we know anything. And sure, it's good to share information, but to not fall into the arrogance of thinking that we know it all. There's always more to know. And that if we keep ourselves open and continuously seek, then the more that will be revealed to us. And that's why it's written, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And the teacher will come in many forms. The teacher will come in the form of life. The teacher will come in the form of information coming our way, in the form of books. We may be introduced to a personal teacher, guru, or master. To guide us on our path. But we have to maintain humility and be open. Okay. So it looks like we've reached the end of our time, and I did cover all the topics that I put in the post. And I could go into more depth on each of those, but I thought those were all important for us to reflect upon, to meditate on, because I think I know all of these things. If we sit and take the time to reflect upon those, that we will grow. Spiritually. We will grow in maturity and awareness. We will become more accountable to ourselves. And we will live in peace with ourselves and in peace with others. We will learn to not get caught up in other people's emotions. Brother Jamal asked the question, should we have any expectation, especially as it pertains to other people? Or should we just live and let live, as the saying goes? No, we should not have expectations of others. And think of it in terms of learning to be in the present. An expectation is a projection into the future. And it's an expectation that we're projecting upon someone else about behavior that we want from them in the future. But we have no control over what people do. Often, the expectations that we place upon others is based upon what we would do in that circumstance, not based upon their history, not based upon who they are being now, who they are now. And so, by having expectations, we're creating these circumstances for our own disappointment and reflection and frustration. And we're taking ourselves out of experiencing and appreciating the current moment and not seeing a person as they are being now. People are who they show themselves to be right now. An expectation is a projection of ours for their behavior, which is probably inconsistent with who they're being right now. So, that's what creates, a lot of disappointment for us. And that's one of the things that creates a lot of frustrations and conflicts in relationships, is when we set expectations of others. And I know that from my spiritual study and from my own experience, because I've made the mistake of having expectations as well. And I realized it was not them that disappointed me. I created the disappointment because I put those expectations on that person rather than just observing who they are being now and letting the chips fall where they may, and then making a decision based upon that. Okay, so that goes to the live and let live, because that's being in the present. So let us meditate and resonate on that. That might be something that is a bit shocking to someone, to many of us. But that just goes back to, again, our happiness or lack thereof is our responsibility, not someone else's. Okay? It's based upon our own choices. So, reflect upon these things. I will post this recording, and I would encourage you to listen to it intently and reflect upon it. And if you do so, you will find it to be beneficial. And if I can help any of you personally on your path, well, let me rephrase that. If you choose to have me help you on your path. Feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook, Sarah, S-A space R-A. Or you can go to my website, which is www.sa-ra.org, and set up an appointment. So with that, we'll see you next time here on Journey into Self. And I'll greet you in the Kemetic words of peace. Hotep. See you next time.